Surveillance footage caught Mackenzie heading to the arrivals area and entering an unknown vehicle at 2:40 a.m. After police interviewed several of Mackenzie's friends and none could confirm that they picked her up, it was discovered that Mackenzie had actually ordered a ride through Lyft. Investigators managed to swiftly track down the driver of the vehicle, a man by the name of Heath Canada. On June 23rd, he was brought in for questioning, where he revealed he had dropped Mackenzie off at Hatch Park in North Salt Lake around 3 a.m. and watched as she entered another vehicle waiting there. Surveillance cameras outside of the park were able to confirm this as Heath's car was picked up leaving the area soon after 3 a.m. The trail had now gone cold, and Heath was not a possible suspect. But a break came on June 26th when a search warrant was issued for a house in the Fair Park neighborhood, located roughly 8 minutes away from Hatch Park. When investigators searched the home, they found evidence that led them to identify a solid suspect. On June 28th, 31-year-old Nigerian-born Ayoola Adisa Ajayi was arrested. In his backyard, police had found a freshly dug hole. The home was also surrounded by surveillance cameras, but these had been mysteriously manually turned off on June 17th. They also searched Ayoola's car, and there, they found a red gas canister that had been purchased 6 hours after Mackenzie had vanished. When Ayoola was questioned, he claimed that he didn't know Mackenzie. But the evidence was against Ayoola because, in the hole in the backyard, police found charred muscle tissue, charred clothing, and a burnt iPhone. In an alley next to the house, investigators also found more charred clothing. With this new evidence, there was enough to detain Ayoola, and he was charged with aggravated kidnapping, aggravated murder, and desecration of a body. After his arrest, a contractor came forward who had been hired to work on Ayoola's residence in April 2019. The contractor claimed Ayoola had asked him to build a secret room that was soundproof and had anchors on the ceiling from which to hang something large. He also requested the room have a fingerprint lock. Ayoola claimed he wanted it done as soon as possible as his Mormon girlfriend was arriving home, and he needed a secret place to store his wine, as she was unaware he drank. But this didn't deter Ayoola from his ultimate goal: murder. When Ayoola was arrested and run through the system, he didn't have any prior criminal convictions per se. But he did have a lurid history. It would only later be revealed that he had sexually assaulted a woman he met on a dating app in 2018, a year before Mackenzie's death. He was also investigated for a rape that occurred in 2014, but no charges were ever pressed against him. So how exactly did Ayoola know Mackenzie? Reportedly, the two connected on a dating site called Seeking Arrangements in 2018. As Mackenzie was traveling to California, the pair agreed to meet once she was back in Utah in June. Ayoola would later confess to police that he knew Mackenzie from the site, but that she had stopped responding after he sent her a photo of himself. This, of course, was a lie, and phone records proved it. Not only did they find a history of text messages between the pair, but both Mackenzie and Ayoola's phones pinged at the same time they met at Hatch Park. The charred remains found in the backyard of Ayoola's home proved to be a match to the DNA profile of Mackenzie Lueck. It was then announced on July 5th, after tracking Ayoola's last movements through his phone, that Mackenzie's body had been found in Logan Canyon, an hour and a half from Ayoola's home. It appeared Ayoola had planned to murder Mackenzie before her arrival, as his surveillance cameras were turned off before the pair made it to his home. Once he and Mackenzie were at his home, he tied her hands behind her back with zip ties and rope and began strangling her by hand. When Mackenzie fought back, he turned her over onto her stomach and strangled her with a belt until she lost consciousness. Mackenzie also had blunt force trauma to the left side of her head, which caused a severe brain hemorrhage that ultimately killed her. The next day, Ayoola burned and buried Mackenzie's remains. But when he realized police were investigating the case, he removed her body and drove it to Logan Canyon, where he buried it in a shallow grave. On October 7th, 2020, Ayoola pleaded guilty to first-degree aggravated murder and third-degree desecration of a human body. In exchange for his plea, the charges of aggravated kidnapping and obstruction of justice were dropped, and he avoided the death penalty. Ayoola Ajayi was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 5 years for desecration of a human body. Ayoola apologized in court, saying, "I am sorry for what I did and I deserve what I get." But Mackenzie's family felt he was insincere. He never gave a full account as to why he murdered Mackenzie, but it was described in court as murder for murder's sake. Ayoola was also charged with more crimes after his arrest and conviction. He was convicted of 1 count of second-degree sexual abuse for the incident in 2018 and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. There were 19 additional charges in a second case of sexual exploitation of a minor due to graphic images found in his possession, the mystery of Mackenzie's death may be solved, but questions still remain. We may never know the real reason Ayoola chose Mackenzie or what his original plan was. The answers may remain forever elusive, shrouded in the darkness of an unspeakable act that claimed the life of a vibrant young woman who simply made an unsuspecting error.